The Plein Air Easton Podcast is brought to you by the Avalon Foundation, enriching the lives of those on the Eastern Shore of Maryland through the arts. Visit avalonfoundation.org for details on events, performances, and educational programming offered throughout the year.
Man, that really sounded like a real thing, didn't it?
You just wait.
You guys are good.
Just wait till Nick makes it really good. He'll
my
add
gosh.
like music to it and stuff, but you won't. I don't listen to them either. I can't hear.
I can't
if you
hear
hear
my
your own
voice.
I'm
no,
like,
I do what you do. I listen to them because I'm like, oh, wow, that was a fun interview. And then I listen to them. I was like, I suck on that interview. It's the same
Yeah.
no, I'm like,
I know, because I was thinking while we were
I'm
doing
like-
it, I was like, wow, this kind of sounds like a Joe Rogan podcast. It's really cool. Like, I feel like I'm like the more plates, more date guy, you know? Like, I'm talking, they're asking great questions. But I know when I listen to it, I'll be like, oh my God.
I sit there and I'm like, do you hear her
Hey, we
voice?
gotta do one more thing. We gotta do
Does
an
she
intro.
sound like that?
What an
idiot.
Stay right there, Tim.
So
You ready, Ryan?
obnoxious.
Hi, welcome everyone. This is the Plein Air Easton Podcast. My name is Tim Wiegand.
Hi, I'm Jess Bellis.
And with Jess, welcome back into the studio. This is
I feel like it's been 100 years since I did a podcast.
We're mid third season. This is
Wow.
it. So, and the last one we did was a recap, I think we did. No, we did somebody else after that, but it's been a while.
It's been a while since I've been on the podcast with you, Tim. I've missed you terribly.
And we're talking with Tim Beall, artist Tim Beall, who's coming up. And it was a great conversation.
No, I mean, I think that those of us who have been in the plein air circuit for a while, we always really value our conversations with Tim Beall. He makes you think about things in a whole new way. And he is smart and kind and thoughtful and always very introspective. So I think that there's a lot to learn, and I appreciate the vulnerability that he shares in this interview.
Yeah, and there's a really cool story about a advertising agency over on the Western Shore in it.
Some teachable moments for everybody.
Please, we're pick things up in media res here. This is Tim Beall on the Plein Air Easton Podcast. Nobody knows. That's going to be the theme. We're going to start the podcast right now. Welcome to the Plein Air Easton Podcast.
Wait, no, stop. Don't start.
No, you can't do it. It would have been perfect.
But I wanted to ask him if there's anything he wants to talk about first.
We can do that. We can do that
On the fly.
Yeah. What do you want to talk about, Tim? We know the one thing he wants to talk about, correct? Imposter syndrome.
I don't know that he does. That's what we were going to ask him about.
I knew that.
Well, he can say no. He can say, that's fine.
I don't know if that's kind of a negative thing, you know, so I don't know if that's okay.
I feel like I have imposter syndrome every day of my life.
Yeah, I do too.
So what do you? How does it pertain to art?
Oh my gosh, it pertains to art in that everything you do is 99% of the time a failure. You're critical of everything you do. Everything has problems. Everything is, man, I can feel my heart starting to beat.
Sure, yeah. Have you always felt this way, or is in your career? Is it? I'm sure it's something that people listening, or collectors might want to know about. But people listening, I'm sure, who are painters or artists probably suffer from that. I mean, like I said, I feel like I have it every day.
Yeah, I think it's always been there, and the myth for me was that I thought it would get better. You know, as I developed, I would get better, so I would have less of that. Mm-hmm. But it feels like it gets worse every year.
Is that right?
Yeah, like but I guess that's why it's called imposter.
What triggers yours, Tim? No, if you don't want to talk about this, we can certainly talk about other things.
I think what triggers mine is it's that negative self-talk. That's what people talk about a lot. And, Terry's a therapist, so she knows a lot about psychology and things. And she's trying to help me all the time. But it's definitely, you're not good enough. Nobody knows, that you're an imposter. You're faking it. You're just going along, and everything you do isn't really good, but everyone else seems to think it is. And man, it's just so.
I want to flip that around though and say, you have had a really prolific art career. You're a grand prize winner at Plein Air Easton. You must know sometimes that you've painted really strong work.
Or is it never? It's
sometimes I paint once in a while. I paint a painting that I like.
That you're like, oh, this is a really good one.
Yeah,
or that you just like.
Yeah, something that I'm happy with, something that I can kind of stand back and go, that's what I was after, but that's really rare. And I hate the way this sounds because it's real dramatic.
No, it's not.
I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it was Nick that I talked to this about, because I don't even know how he got this out of me, but he got me on this trend.
Nick might have made up the term.
Yeah. So we were talking about it, and he said, man, I'd really like to talk to you more about this kind of thing. So that's where it came from. And I when I was driving here, I was like, oh, I wonder if they're going to bring that up, and that's what this is going to be about.
No, it doesn't have to be. No.
I don't want to bum the world out. I think we got enough to be sad about right now. And
Tim, I don't think it's bumming people out. I mean, I think the reason, because Nick did tell us, he said that he thought that it would be a good topic to talk about. He mentioned it in the meeting, which he never does because he couldn't be here today. And I asked what it was in the meeting, and I think it's very, very interesting. I'm sure, I guess to talk about something like this, you don't want to create more of it, and make people think they have it when they don't or whatever. And I'm being facetious when I say I have it every day. It was just kind of like, oh, I understand. So I don't think it's a dare. I think what are you doing to combat it? Because that's probably the main thing, right? Or do you want to combat it?
Oh, I definitely want to combat it. I often try to minimize, how that there's that saying, you're your own worst critic?
Yeah.
Well, I try to combat it by saying, you're not your own worst critic. There are other people that are being more critical of your work than you are. They see more flaws than you see. So get over yourself and try to go, it's good enough, I'm doing my best kind of thing. And that's my way of combating. I know that sounds like almost like it's canceling itself out. It's not positive self-talk.
No. I want to hear a conversation between you and Jess settling for the fact that it's just good enough. I want to hear that conversation between you both.
Just good enough is a hard. That's a, I am the quintessential straight A student, and I think that one thing that I really struggle with is like when it's okay not to get an A. Even you can even maintain an A average and not always get an A. And so it's saying like, can I actually like deliver B+ work to you today, or even C level average work is really hard for me to accept in myself because, I want that A all the time. I'm very driven for it. And so, trying to dial it back is really tough.
Yeah.
And you're doing that, but you're doing that with painting. You're going through some sort of that with painting, and you're getting the A or whatever. You're coming at it from, hey, it's good enough, and for you personally.
Yeah. The difference is, I think, is that often the things that I do that I'm happy with aren't given the A. So that's a conundrum in and of itself when you're going, okay, what people like that I do isn't necessarily the thing that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, it's tough, right?
Yeah. Well, and I want to dial this all back to the where you said that this feels like a downer. And I guess what I would say is, I think, especially in this day and age when there is so much darkness, I think we need to talk about how we feel and how we address things. I think that there's so much to be learned from that, and there's so much shared space in that. Mm-hmm. When you are sort of saying like, here are some of my vulnerabilities and this is how it does affect me. So I don't think it's a downer. I think it makes for a joyful, safe space because people don't feel as alone.
Yeah.
I think that back to your comment about people not necessarily digging on the things that you think are really good sometimes, I think that is how art makes people so vulnerable. I mean, I would think that this like quote unquote imposter syndrome probably is more prolific in an art community than in other places because you're constantly kind of exposing yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. With a physical thing that comes out in, to be judged.
Yeah. And every aspect of it is so subjective. I mean, even to the point of where I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, well, you're who you are, and you've walked a completely different path than every other person on earth. So like even your standards for yourself are unique to every other person. So like what I'm trying to do, what I'm putting effort into and focus on, someone else might go, that doesn't matter at all.
No, they can't see it through your lens at all.
Yeah. So you're sitting there beating yourself up. Oh, I failed again. And they're like,
they see something totally different in what you just did because it speaks to them and their experience.
Yeah.
So is the art that you create for you or for other people?
It's changing all the time. It's, it's based on like my perspective at that moment, whatever my goal is. Like sometimes, obviously when you're in a paint out, you're thinking about the 57 other artists that you're essentially competing against because it's called a competition. You're thinking about all the people that show up on Friday to the collector's party. You're thinking of any buyer that might walk through the exhibit throughout the weekend. What am I going to do to try to make a person walk into that room and be drawn right to your picture and go, that's what I want to take home? Because, at the end of the day, we all have to put food on the table, pay your mortgage and things like that. So but every now and then I will go out and just say, today, you're just going to do you. You're going to do you. You're going to do something for yourself. Try to enjoy the process. A lot of times it's sort of a more principled approach. Like I'm going to execute an idea today. If it doesn't work out and doesn't make a good picture, that's okay. But as long as I learn something by striving to do something that, do 150 push-ups in a minute kind of thing, like, can I do that? If I don't, I didn't do it, but I tried, my best. So when I'm painting for myself, it's when I'm more, it's definitely a kind of a more pure thing, I guess. And I'm okay with the results usually. But paint outs, that's a different thing.
It's a different mindset.
Yeah.
Because it's for a different purpose even.
Yeah. Watching the Super Bowl last night, I was like, man, Hurts and Mahomes must just feel so much pressure. So, the weight of their fan nations bearing down on them to be excellent, and I'm like, how do they do that? How? I wouldn't be able to throw the ball 20 feet. My arm would just be so locked up with fear, with pressure. The whole, idea of a massively horrific outcome. You've watched Super Bowls where somebody just had the worst night of their life on that stage. And
like the Chiefs missed that first field goal, right?
Yeah, it hit the uprights.
Doing, it was like a real moment that.
Yeah, so on that last kick, I was like, oh.
We all were like,
That is some nerve.
This could be really the worst night of your life, for real.
Yeah, because everyone was kind of thinking it was a foregone conclusion. Kansas City was going to win. Just got to kick this 25-yard field goal, and I was like, this could not be worse for that guy.
Yeah, no, we were all sitting there like, oh, really tough, really tough. How disciplined are you at going to make that time and space to go and just paint for you?
Very undisciplined about it, and that's where the negative self-talk comes in, and I almost have to be coached into it, I guess. Someone has
Terry's pushing you out the door. I think you need to go paint for a while.
Yeah, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to Rogan, Jocko Willink, David Goggins, and Goggins is one. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's ultra profane with the way he talks to you about your inner weak spot.
Got it.
And but I try to take some time and listen to guys that are saying, hey, just get over yourself, get out there, don't be such a sissy, kind of thing. And but even some days that doesn't even work. I'm always going through this process of what I think is good, I realize is evil, and what I think is evil is good. And, so somebody that I'm crushing on because of their ideologies or the way they're living. I'll go through a period of that, but then at some point I'll go, man, this is just marketing, and this is his brand, and this is how he's going to get the most amount of dudes to follow him, and really it's bad stuff. And just... Do
you listen to Tim Ferriss at all?
I'm familiar with him, and I definitely...
That's somebody who's... I don't think is marketing. But anyway, Tim, not to cut you off there, but Jess, do you think we should add some profanity into our Plein Air podcast? Can we get some more listeners, you think? You are a great painter.
I don't know.
We'll have to ask Nick about that.
Yeah, we'll consider that. So we'll consider. No, I think that in terms of my own self-talk, and it's not like none of this podcast is about me, but I just keep trying to tell myself, like, when I am in that space where I'm being so self-critical, I have to try to stop myself and say, like, I would beat somebody up who was talking about my friend that way. I would never let somebody say the terrible things that I can say to myself about Tim. I would go to the mats.
Right.
Like, he is a dear friend of mine. I would be ready to go. And if I'm being that mean to myself, I have to be like that. You cannot be that person who's that mean to Jessica, because I would not want someone treating my friends that way.
Right.
You have to be that nice to yourself, and it's hard. But
I always tell that, again, with the actors that I'm working with, when we finish a play, I'm like, look, go home and congratulate. You're lying in your bed. Take 2 seconds and pat yourself on the back and congratulate yourself. I'm always like, if a dog sits, you treat him better than you're going to treat yourself after what you did tonight. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
It's like. So I do think that you got to take time to congratulate yourself.
Tim, you might actually be your worst critic. I know how you're you were saying your self-talk was there's someone else who's more critical of your work than you. Maybe not. Maybe you are the worst to yourself.
Yeah, but I have been around some very critical people, critical artists that I've witnessed firsthand, people that build themselves up by
tearing
other people down. And so then maybe part of the self-talk is that I've told people that sometimes when I'm painting, I'm standing at the easel, I kind of hear a peanut gallery behind me, and it's probably sort of some montage of all the criticism I've heard of others, because that's what I'm not hearing people saying, Tim Beall sucks, he doesn't know anything. But in my mind, I'm like...
Quite the contrary, actually.
Yeah, but in my mind, I hear this kind of... It's awful. This is the part that I was a little worried about, talking about out loud, because it's like a very personal, private sort of thing. But I guess if it helps somebody, I'm okay with it. But, I've told this to close friends. I'll say, I just hear these people going, oh, you can't do this, you're terrible at that. And I'm working and I'm creating art, hanging on the wall, and somebody's buying it. And little do they know that the whole time I was working on that, it was all this bombardment of negativity, just literally this crowd behind me.
But does that motivate you?
I'm just going to say, isn't that how the greats worked? I'm not calling you, that gets a whole other thing, but
I'm not comfortable with that, because I had an artist walk up to me. I was painting down.
And again, I'm not calling you the great. I'm talking about, because I'm not a person to say that. I'm just making an observation of watching movies and reading books about these people. Yeah, that there was a lot going on.
Yeah. That I can go to the National Gallery, and my favorite gallery in the whole world is the Museum of American Art in D.C. It's connected to the Portrait Gallery, and I can walk around there and at the end of a day of looking at the painters in there, I know without a doubt I'm not great. My paintings will never be in that gallery. It's just not going to happen.
Okay, but that doesn't...
So,
the way they work, with this inner battle going on. They were, I don't know. I watched the one about one of the great, Pollock.
Yeah.
Ed Harris played Pollock. That guy, he had to go out into the I'm just... you're an artist, and it's right. I mean,
yeah. That was a good movie, by the way. I love that movie. But I love it.
Remember that guy? He had the same demons, right?
Yeah.
Let's dial it back. Just Tim, have you always painted?
No, I did not paint until I was quite old. I've come to the game
Quite old.
pretty-
He's not even that old right now.
Well,
Quite old.
yeah.
Like we've had people who have like picked up painting. Like, wait, how old was Mick McAndrews when he started painting? He was like, I don't know, but he was like retired, right?
Right,
Like
yeah,
we've
Mick
talked
McAndrews,
to
yeah.
some that like,
Yeah.
you're,
Well, I would say maybe Mick always liked drawing and painting, because my story is it's unfortunate, and I grew up in a what people are probably now calling, I think, is toxic masculinity environment.
okay, sure. Yep.
The focus when I was a kid was on athletics, hunting, doing, like man things. It's just my environment. My brother, my father, we loved to do those things. And it was sort of like just assume this is what we do. I know that things are really changing very fast now, and it's all good. But when I was a real young boy at I can remember in middle school it felt like the teachers were kind of beginning to write little notes in the empty space on your report card that would say something like, he's not the sharpest knife out of the drawer. Math and English is a little bit of a struggle for him, but he's quite artistic.
Shows proficiency in art.
Yes, yeah. And I would almost want to erase that off of the paper, riding the bus home. And I had this really
because you wanted to be a jock, because that's what you thought the standard was.
That was the standard. It was like I was looking always at everything as I don't want to be noticed as a kid in the back of the room that can draw everybody's drawing project, because that's what was happening. Was kids
I love
were
those guys. They're my best buddies.
Well, now they are my best buddies too. But when I was younger, I was like, I don't want to not get picked. Because in Centerville Middle School, we played tackle football during recess. We literally would go out there and just throttle each other. And I had this attitude of I'm not just going to get picked. I'm going to be one of the first ones picked. You line up and they go, I'll take Tim, I'll take Bobby,
right.
kind of thing. If I wasn't in the top three, I was upset. Like I was a little, something hurt. And so the art thing, I kind of knew. I was like, okay, they don't go together. They're dramatically separate. Like the kid that I knew that was like the fellow draftsman in the class, he wasn't even out there. He would just go to the, sit on the blacktop and draw
in his sketchbook or whatever. And you were like, I'm not that kid.
Yeah. And so I had to go through this whole world process thing to get over that. And really what it was, I think, was life comes at you, and you get enough wisdom at a certain point where you can kind of go, okay, I'm supposed to be good at something that's useful. And the athletic thing, that's for just a very small group of people.
At the time when we were growing up, yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very.
But it pans out for
It's
just
a lot different
few.
now.
Yeah.
You could be people are getting paid to coach mini football now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So,
And there's so many sports now. I'm like,
they got
I'd
the
say to
best
myself,
field. I mean, they got these facilities that are just like, I mean, it's,
yeah.
It's so, anyway, but yeah, so you were trying to figure out something that was useful.
Yeah, I got to that place in life where lacrosse didn't, pan out as, being my career kind of thing, because I got pretty good at that. I'm pretty proud of my lacrosse story. But, when push came to shove, I was like, okay, I got to do something that I can do every single day, sun up to sundown, and be pretty good at it. What are your natural God-given talents? And that's when I said, well, I guess I better give this a shot. And it all kind of happened very fortuitously, is that the word? Where some things happened in my life. I met the Egelis, and that was all right at the same time when I was starting to ask these questions of myself. And I literally found a roommate wanted to add, and my dad lived down South County, West River, and I was down there, and I saw this ad in the paper that said, artist family seeking roommate. you know? And I'm like, and it said Birdsville. And I'm like, Birdsville? That's like right down the street. There's no artists around here kind of thing. And so I called up and I spoke to Joan Egeli, the matriarch of the family, and she was just crazy. You know, like everything she was saying to me, I was like, whoa, I've never met a person like this. And so she was like, come on down here and we'll show you around. And I go down there and they scared the hell out of me. They were like, yeah, you should just quit your job, throw away everything you've trained up to this point and come and live with us and be an artist kind of thing. And I literally, like, I remember I jumped in my Jeep and I drove down that driveway and I was like, I'm never going back there. That was crazy.
People are nuts.
Yeah, because they're real artists.
Yes.
And so like a year went by and I just thought about it. And it would like, there would be nights where I couldn't sleep at night. I would be thinking about them and what she said, you know, and then
But she just looked at you and that was her advice? Or you brought a sketch over there? Like they just...
Yeah, they asked me to bring some of my work, which was just college art class stuff, real rudimentary, no ability, no knowledge. I didn't know anything.
But that's you talking. That's not what they saw, though, or she wouldn't have said those things to you, correct? Like, I want you to revisit that for a moment.
I think Cedric, because he was there, we were sitting in their living room. They have this, you know, these leather wingback chairs around a wood stove and this leather ottoman, you know, the thing you put your feet on. And I just took my portfolio that was all like graphic design stuff from Frostburg. And I threw it down and Cedric's like paging through it real casually. And then he just said, yeah, I think you got enough to begin with that we could probably shape you into something. And that was, but you know, the Egelis, they
wouldn't have said that to just anybody.
Probably not.
Yeah.
They would definitely not have said to me if
No.
I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Now, so you're in your bed and you're thinking about this. You're like, it hasn't been a year, right? So you're late. You had nights in bed where you're thinking about it. So then what happened?
I think I just got to a point with what I was doing. I was working for an advertising agency in Annapolis, and it was horrible. It was, you know, it wasn't their fault. Advertising is very deadline oriented. You know, I'd be sitting there at a computer operating a Macintosh, utilizing a program called Quark Express, and I could never really figure it out, you know, how to make type flow through a editorial document, you know, with all these pages. And
I don't know Tim very well, but I really cannot picture him thriving in that environment. It does, like, I even know that would be a really bad situation for you. I can't. Were you sitting in a tiny cubicle too? It just sounds horrible.
Actually, it was an ad agency, so it was a beautiful environment.
Open space.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was like
good,
brick
good.
wall here, old timey
good,
brick
good,
wall.
good,
But
good.
so not that bad, but
still.
But the pressure to be good at it and me not knowing anything, because I went to Frostburg and learned how to cut ruby lithe and do lino press. It was literally like letters that you draw on with a pencil tip and it pushes it down and adheres to like, you know, cardstock, and you do typesetting that way.
Right.
And then I go out in the world. I really was upset at Frostburg, but probably shouldn't publish this. But I was like, I learned all this degree, and then when I went to get a job, they were like, do you know how to operate Adobe Illustrator, Quark Express, Photoshop? And I was like, what's that? You know? Yeah. But again, the God-given talent part, I will say, I really didn't know anything, but people kind of along the way were like, he has a good sense for like shapes and design. And I really believe that is something that, I guess this is when I get up on my high horse.
No.
Because,
I love you.
because
I don't have this what you have.
Yeah, that's something that I had no control over. I don't take responsibility for it, but I have it.
Right.
You know, and it's kind of like that's another thing that does get me going at times, is that I go, well, you do have this gift that you didn't earn it, you didn't buy it, you don't even deserve it, but you have it and you got to use it, kind of thing. And that's sort of, you were asking how do you get over it on occasion. Sometimes I'll be like, you know, you're really trashing that if you don't just go out and try. you know. So getting the job at the ad agency, literally the art director that sat me down and interviewed me and then ultimately made the decision to hire me. And then one day he's sitting there eating his mid-morning breakfast snack, and he goes, you're the first person we ever hired here that we didn't actually really like. And that was sort of like almost like the tipping point of where I started to really go, do you belong here? Is this really what you want to do? And he was basically going, we liked your portfolio. We liked how you design things. We can see potential in what you can actually do for this company. But as far as like everyone sitting at the big table eating lunch, you always just go out the door, and I would go sit on the curb and eat my little BLT sandwich and my Coke and just kind of be by myself, But so...
Well, it sounds like they didn't welcome you very well. I mean, that is very nice. Who is it? I want to know.
They were only responding to that thing I talked about earlier with the like toxic masculinity thing. Where
you were too tough for him?
They were just like, he just doesn't fit in with us, because they were sitting around talking about.
It was a company culture mismatch.
They happen every. You got 10 of it's a company mismanagement, I think. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, the way I wound up leaving that
when you
company...
see somebody like that, you should go out and talk to them, just so anybody listening to that podcast. You have to say, let them know you're there, at least.
Yeah.
Like, don't just let the guy in his first...
Right, find common ground.
Especially if all 11 of you are eating lunch together and there's one guy over there. Just go out and say something, one of you, please.
He's sitting on the curb, yes.
Yeah. A real good buddy of mine used to come in, stick his head in, at the front desk almost every day, because he lived downtown, and he would pop his head in and he'd like yell something to me, and the whole place would just kind of turn their heads and go, what was that? And I'd be over there like, oh, that's my buddy. He wants to make sure I'm done at 5:30 so we can get in the truck and drive into DC to play rugby for the Washington Irish down on the mall. So he's like, you're going to be there, right? And I'll be like, I'll be there. Meanwhile, they just, I was an alien to them. So, but that was, again, one of those things where it was perfect timing. Everything, Terry's always saying, everything is as it should be. Even the worst things, the worst things that happen are exactly as they should be. And it's taken me a long time.
That's hard to take in.
Yeah.
We are talking with Tim Beall or Beall?
Bell. It's Bell. It's always been Bell. That's another story.
We're going to talk about that when we come back in just a few minutes. This is the Plein Air Easton Podcast. I'm Tim Wagon, and I'm with Jess Bellis. We'll be right back with ex-Frostburg lacrosse player, Tim Beall.
Hey everyone, producer of the podcast, Nick Richards here. We're so glad you've been enjoying our podcasts. We put a lot of love into creating them in hopes of building a more robust community around our festival. If you're interested in even more Plein Air Easton material, boy oh boy do I have news for you. If you head over to the Plein Air Easton YouTube channel, youtube.com/Plein Air Easton, you'll find live streams of our festival events, including this year's awards ceremony, time-lapse videos of plein air artists creating their beautiful masterpieces, as well as episodes of the podcast. We also have a series of instructional videos from competition artists and alumni, including Lori Putnam, Paul Botcham, Susan Lin, Beth Bathe, Joe Giersick, and Master Joe Vuong. For $50, you can watch one of our incredible artists explain their techniques and artistic philosophies step by step. With views of the artist, the canvas, the palette, and the subject, you'll be able to observe the entire process. And your purchase includes unlimited replays, so you can watch the lesson over and over again. Later this year, we will be releasing more instructional videos with Thomas Bucci, Robert J. Simone, and Julie Riker. To check them out, visit vimeo.com/Avalon Foundation/VOD_pages. That's vimeo.com/Avalon Foundation/VOD_pages. All this additional content can keep you connected to the artists and offerings of the event, and we hope to see you next summer at Plein Air Easton.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Plein Air Easton Podcast. I'm Tim Wagon here with...
Oh, hey, I'm Jess Bellis.
I got to say your name there once in a while. We messed that up on the intro. Tim, welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us here. We want to talk. I want to know Tim Beall. It was one of the first winners of Plein Air Easton.
Yes.
And painted very, very big, and had his name up there for 17 years. Tim Beall, my best friend was one of my best friends when I was a kid was named Gary Bell. It was okay, cool. This is Tim, and then one year you put an A after the E,
Yep.
and nobody thought you were crazy or anything. They're just like, no, that's just his new thing, and then I almost introduced you as Tim Beall. I was corrected in the last segment. What prompted all that, or not all that, just that, and how do you pronounce your name, and what's your middle name?
It's pronounced Bell. It always has been, but it's been a thing, I guess, in my life that I've sort of dealt with. If I see old classmates from elementary school, and we're reconnecting for the first time, it makes me laugh because they always run up to me and, they're like, Timmy Beall. And that's what I was known as in pretty much my whole life. When I went in the Marine Corps, my drill instructors called me Beall. My fellow recruits called me Beall. I never corrected anybody. It was one of those things.
I got Wigan. I got never correcting anybody too.
Yeah, you just weird, get right? tired of it, Like think of all the French names you've seen over your lifetime that they pronounce it. I knew a kid named Pelletier. I was in the Marines with him, and I realized a long time later, I was like, it's like probably Pelletier or something,
right.
So having been referred to as because of the spelling of my name, because I was born Beall, it's a really old Maryland name. And, Al and I are related, and the Bells and the Magruders go way back. There was a time when Prince George's County was literally like this enclave of Scottish immigrant, like lots of them prisoners of war, indentured servants and whatnot, that came to the New World when it was still, the white people defending themselves against the Indians, or actually the Indians defending themselves against the white people.
Right, correct.
The incomers. And I won't go... It's sort of not a good subject for me to talk about as far as how my name was changed, but it got changed at a certain point, and then it was real easy because everyone would just look at my name and go, "Oh, Bell." It looks
pronounce it correct.
Pronounce
it correctly, even though it was spelled incorrectly.
It was not the correct spelling. Yes, and it actually did alienate me from a part of my family history that I'm very proud of,
Sure, yeah.
I remember I called an aunt of mine, an aunt, and she literally, when she picked up the phone, she was like, why does your name, like, what is this name that's on my caller ID? And I remember thinking, this is so awkward, and obviously it really upset my dad, because I'm, carrying on the name kind of thing, and it hurt him. And I realized that over time.
As you got older.
As I got older. And so eventually I changed it back to what it originally was.
But now
I have to deal with everyone saying the Beall Gallery in St. Michael's or
your dad, they don't understand, do they?
Oh, and then the whole art world that has known me as the Bell.
Right. When they're like, Tim Beall didn't get in this year, but I really like this Tim Beall's artwork.
Yeah.
He really evokes early Tim Beall.
Yeah.
All world.
Or they walk right past my gallery in St. Michael's and they're like, well, that's not Tim Beall. Yeah. And I'm like, it's just one letter. Good Lord.
That's great.
Yeah.
How about those of us who bought paintings in your early career? Do you think that they'll be worth more or less with the wrong spelling on them?
Yeah. I guess that's part of the provenance, isn't it? Almost like makes it more easy to track.
Like a limited edition
yeah.
or something. This is from his Bell period.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely the time span, it, kind of locks that up. They're like, oh, we know this is his early work because it has that spelling. Because sometimes they guess. We don't know. This could be late period.
Right. No,
but they'll know.
It's like a benchmark.
Yeah.
I like that.
But I always sign my name so kind of indescript that like it's almost unrecognizable. I always say, really, it's just a mark. It's like an X. but a certain way you make that X. But now mine has just one little extra mark in it, so. But,
to denote the later period or the middle period, perhaps. Maybe you're in the middle period.
Yeah,
who knows?
Yeah. But it's funny that we're talking about this because I knew an artist, I won't name any names, but an artist that had it was a French name, and they had always just accepted the English pronunciation, which was completely un-French. And then, I guess they got pretty good, developed a reputation, or, became some semi-famous. And all of a sudden they came out one day and they were like, I want you to say my name in the French pronunciation. And it just sounded so hoity-toity, right. That everybody was laughing about it.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of, I was like, oh, how am I going to not let that happen? How am I going to explain to everyone, look, it's always been Bell. It's Bell from the beginning. It's still Bell. It never was Beall. And even, to me, Bell is more simple, and it's, but the funny thing about it is that my ancestor that came over to this country as a Cromwellian prisoner from the Battle of Dunbar, he was born Bell, so. And I went back to Scotland, and I went to the little parish records in Largo, Scotland, this little tiny fishing village. And they kept really good records because of the king. He wanted his taxes.
Sure.
And so I go to the library in that town, and they have it all on microfiche. And I literally go to the Scottish librarian, and I'm like, I'm looking for my ancestors' birth certificate, birth registry. And she pulled it up, and it was written in the old script and everything. And I'm sitting there going, oh, look, it's Bell.
So, like, who put the A in there?
He put it in here when he came. He was like, right, yeah. It was really brilliant in a way because he then distinguished his line from that point forward. Like every person in Maryland, when I meet a Bell, like there's that antique guy or appraiser guy down Claiborne Bell, he pronounces it Bell. And I'm like, we're cousins, maybe very distant.
Yeah. But it must be in the same line. Because how else would it be?
Yeah. And I went to high school with Beals that I was like, you're Bells, you're Bells. But they would just say Beall. And I even knew of direct relatives, bloodline, like, your grandfather was my grandfather's brother.
Sure.
And they would say Beall and literally go, no, that's how we say it. And I'm like, well, that's not how it's pronounced. Because Ninian Bell would say, as in ringing bell, when he would tell people. I think it was a thing where they were trying to cover up their Scottishness.
Yeah, sure.
Because it wasn't, it was kind of like what the Irish went through. The old Nina thing.
Well, there's legacies across all kinds of cultures where when they came to the United States, their names were changed or Americanized or shortened or, there's plenty of that.
Yeah. You kind of just want to hide and be, I'm just an American.
Right.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that's a very great story. I'm glad I got Tim Beall, no change, because, and a very interesting story, Tim. I guess I know Jess wants to get in here. We want to talk about the Egelis and what happened. But before we're going into the history of your name and that sort of thing, and like taking the time to do that and traveling over there and that sort of thing, I was just curious if there's a historical bent to any of does that come out in your paintings at all? Like, how do you study the art craft of being an artist or whatever? How do you
like from maybe a genealogical ancestral standpoint, or like do you think I think it does have enough. I feel like this is probably going to be incredibly offensive to some people, but I'm just going to say it and you can edit it out if you don't like it. But I really believe that we are, as human beings, there are, you have dogs, right? And there's a Chihuahua, and there's a Scottish Terrier, and there's a Pit Bull, and there's the Great Dane, and the Irish Setter, and they're all so different, but they all descend from the wolf, So the wolf, I guess, is like what you'd almost equate to being the Adam and Eve or something. But then it branches off, and you have all these breeds, you know. And I've noticed in life that stereotypes are totally earned in a way. Like you could almost, really, all my Irish friends, man, they go from 0 to 60 in a split second. Like you say something that upsets them, and that's even, I feel like maybe a somewhat of a even Scottish trait. So that maybe the Celtic gene. I have friends of different, I won't name ethnic backgrounds, but I'll say that I have friends that they're just incredibly calm in the face of just about anything you do or say. They're just like, hey, you know, I'm calm. Everything's okay. I'm going to talk about this, you know, whereas someone else might be like shaking their fork at me, you know. And
well, there's definitely, there is even a whole school of thought about inherited drama. Like, can trauma rewrite your DNA?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that when you are raised in a culture, you are inheriting the traits of that culture. And do cultures create stereotypes? They definitely do. Yeah. But, you know, it's even, you know, if you have someone in your family who drowned, they can trace generations later where there's fear of water. Mm-hmm. And it's just because of slightly different behavioral shifts in parenting that can like go generation by generation because of that like trauma that happened. So I think that like genealogy does inform a lot of the things that we do, those inherited traits that are in our DNA, which is part of what it's cultural, it's in your DNA and it's there. Yeah. So it must come out in your painting. So what could you point to?
I think the contribution made to my efforts through my DNA is definitely that analytical side. Like for me, art, it's kind of unfortunate. Like I have a difficult time enjoying art. I'm always dissecting it, always looking at it and cutting it apart and trying to understand the individual components. Whereas I feel like some people have the ability, even other painters, they can stand and look at a painting and go, oh my God, so beautiful. It just takes my breath away. And I'll be standing there thinking, man, what was he doing with this? You know, like, was that deliberate, or, you know, what was he thinking about?
Maybe Tim Beall is your worst critic.
No, but there is so much art that I cannot criticize, that I don't have a critical thing to say about it. So, but maybe it's not mine. Yeah. So maybe that is, but I know where I fall short. You know, I do know that. Like, it's not made up. It's not being dramatic. Like, I can look at really fine paintings and just go, wow, that's amazing. If only I could do that.
Do you want to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Do I want to critique myself, or
no? Do you want to create those really great paintings?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to push yourself and get there.
Yeah, but I just don't know if I have it in me. You know, like, can I? You know, there was a time I wanted to play in the NBA, but one day I realized I'll never play in the NBA. I'm never going to do it. It's not going to happen.
Right.
So did you call back the Egelis? Like, what happened?
Back to the Egelis now. For those, yeah, Tim he's got an awesome job as a graphic designer that nobody talks to him, and he's making this decision as to whether to become an artist or how he's going about that.
Yeah, I eventually called them back. I actually lost my best friend of my whole life, still to this day. He was killed in a car accident.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and you know, that was a big, like,
shook your life.
Yeah, I was like, okay, nobody gets out of here alive.
It's limited.
Yeah,
right.
It's limited. You don't have much time, and that made me go, you're gonna take some chances. You're gonna find out, you know, if you can do this or not. And it was, it felt like I was rolling the dice. Like, I was like, I could just totally fail at this, and it looked pretty bad for a while. I did run in again to a little bit of that. Not entirely. Cedric and Jonette were really good to me, and one of their daughters, Anastasia, particularly I believe saw something in me that was like, okay, this person is worth my time, and I'm going to help him as much as, as I choose to. And so it was, but I definitely was stepping into a world where, again, like the ad agency, I didn't really fit in. And I was trying to, I remember some of the relationships I formed amongst that group early on. I was really trying to, jam a square peg in a round hole. Like, I can talk like these people. I can act like them. But I was kind of faking it, and but Cedric and Jonette, Cedric, at the Egelis, the chicken must lay an egg. You have to carry your weight. You have to do your part. You have to, you got to contribute. And I was fortunate as having done some boat carpentry, and Cedric was rebuilding a boat that his dad built when he was really young. And so my way of kind of paying for my, rent and art instruction was helping him. And he is very passionate about that boat. And so that was sort of like my way in to what I would consider almost a more privileged place. In other words, he was kind of not enough, but he was talking about art. Like, I'd be painting the bottom of the boat, and he would walk up and say, that's actually, you know how to put paint on. That's what you need to be able to do when you're painting a portrait. And most people would never have said anything like that. They wouldn't equate like anything to do with painting the hull of a boat with painting a really fine portrait of a Maryland governor. But Cedric, I don't know, sometimes I wonder if he wasn't just trying to make me feel like it's going to be okay, because you're struggling, because I definitely wasn't the most talented. There were kids in that class, because I was pretty young. It was 1994 when I went and started really studying with them hard. And there were kids of famous portrait painters in that group. There were kids that went to, big time art schools that knew all this art knowledge. They could quote great artists. They knew everything about it. And I was literally like, I don't know any of this stuff. I was starting really from scratch. Frostberg really taught me how to do, the advertising aspect of it all, but nothing to do with fine art. No, draftsmanship skills, painting, the nuts and bolts of creating paintings. That I didn't really learn that at Frostberg. They found out, the level of success that I achieved, which, is not really much to write home about. I'm like maybe locally a little bit known, but Frostberg probably felt like, wow, we haven't had an artist from our program do this well, maybe. I don't know. There's probably some out there that I just don't know about them. I don't want to disparage an institution, but they had me come back and give like a presentation to the student body, the art student body in the art department. And I'm standing there, showing slides of my work and talking about Plein Air Easton. And I'm like, if you want to do this, you got to apply to this event. It's, it's kind of like a game changer. And, but at some point, without even thinking about it, I blurted out, I didn't learn any of this stuff here. And I remember my guidance counselor who, got me through Frostberg, and it was not easy to do that. He's in the back, like doing the throat cut technique, the symbol cutting his throat. Yeah. And I realized what I had said, and I tried to backtrack, but it was at that point.
It was done.
It was done. I had said it, because there were a couple kids in there that were kind of, I could tell by when they came up to me later, they wanted to know more.
Yeah.
And when someone does that, they're 18 and they're going, tell me your story kind of thing. You're like, I had to go, well, just keep going to Frostberg. You'll get everything you need right here, But Frostberg was great. I was Eastern Shore kid. I wanted to go live in the mountains a while. I was supposed to go to Salisbury or Washington, right? But I was like, it's just, Chestertown, really? Salisbury?
Right.
So I was like, I'm going to go out to Frostberg.
That's great.
Well, there's so much learned in college that is not learned in the classroom, too. It is where you do a lot of growing up and discovering yourself and learning, interpersonal relationships and that sort of thing, too.
Yeah. Tim, I want to ask you in terms of plein air competitions, and you can speak in terms of Plein Air Easton if you'd like. a lot of people who are jocks, not a lot of, but you know them when they come out. A lot of people that were jocks, play a lot of sports, move to the arts in ways. A lot of them become actors and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering, in terms of Plein Air Easton, when you have like a 2-hour or the week-long part of the competition or the 2-hour quick draw, if that is like when you're trying to get something done that, particularly that you like, is that like playing a game to you? Is that like being in the game? Like
I consider paint outs, and I'm not putting it on right now. My favorite paint out is Plein Air Easton. For the longest time, it was the only one I did. I went to one they have a really good event in Texas, but that was helped quite a bit by the fact that my son was stationed at Goodfellow he's a Marine, and he was going to Signals Intel school there. So I was like, wait, he's in Texas, and I hadn't seen him in a long time.
I would love to go to your Texas event.
Yeah, but to their credit, they put on an amazing event.
They do.
It almost, I probably shouldn't say that, but it's pretty close, but not quite, because it's not home. When I'm in Texas, I'm like, whoa, this place is different.
Yes.
And I like it.
They
But
called us.
it's different. Yeah.
Well, she comes up here every year. We've done.
I know Barbara Rallo actually comes during the
Yes.
event, and my host from the year before last, my host is coming to
This year?
Plein Air, Tim and Jennifer Crutchfield.
Awesome.
And I don't know where they're staying, because they were like, hey, we're coming to Easton for Plein Air. And I was like, oh, cool, where are you staying? I'll give you a place. And they're like, we got it all locked up. We'll see you in July.
That's
and
awesome.
They're really cool. He's got this beautiful ranch, and but that's a whole nother story. But I love talking about this part, because I feel like sometimes this is overlooked, and I think it's important, and that is the mindset in a plein air event, a competition, versus being an artist. 360 of the rest of the days a year, or however long it is. As an athlete, and I played basketball and lacrosse in high school, and when you play a sport, it's usually a team sport, or even if it's an individual sport, you're training to win the season, the whole season, to get to the championship. You're practicing, right? And as an artist, you're in the studio all the time, painting, learning, growing, painting, and you're trying to paint the championship painting, the winning championship, kick the ball through the uprights with 3 seconds left, and you get it, you win, you miss, your team loses. Plein air events are, to me, akin to when you go to the, I guess it was the NBA All-Star game that they did this. I don't think it was a championship. In fact, it would definitely be the All-Star game. So it's not the best analogy, but I used to say to myself, kind of psych myself up, I would say, this event, this 7-day, 10-day painting event, is the slam dunk contest at the NBA All-Star game. It's like a one-time, top of the key, I'm going to do a 300, or, well, more than a 360, because I'm going to do it behind the back, And it's like trying to do that slam dunk move in front of a big crowd to get the biggest roar so that you win it. Whereas paintings, easel paintings all the time for galleries or museums, whatever level you're at. I'm not a museum artist yet. Probably won't be, maybe until I'm long gone. Maybe they'll make it the museum. But right now I paint for galleries and patrons. But painting day to day, it's different because you're really going for the best you can do developmentally. There's no time limitations. There's no restrictions as to where you are, size, any restrictions at all. You can do whatever you want on a day-to-day basis, whereas during a plein air event, you do have like parameters or guidelines that you have to work within. And so I've always said, to my fellow competitors that I really care about and, love a lot of the people that I go head to head with in these events. I'll say, look, you really got to look at this like this isn't just day to day being an artist. This isn't, another day. This is kind of special. It's the slam dunk contest.
Right.
What can you do right here, right now, in front of everyone?
Bring it.
And I always say, have a plan, practice it over and over. I really feel like the ideal thing for a plein air artist to do is to paint that painting a whole bunch of times before you paint it for because it has to be stamped. It has to be on a blank canvas. When you arrive on that Saturday morning at the Avalon for the orientation, they're going to stamp them all up. You should have that painting and maybe I shouldn't be talking about this.
You're giving all your keys.
Yeah.
Well, it is. We've talked to multiple people about what their sort of mindset is going into a big competition, and it is really interesting. There are plenty of artists who really do have a lot of work sketched out or practiced. They kind of know what their competition paintings at least are going to be for the year. Yeah. And then there's others who, are leaning a bunch against the wall and having us vote before they bring them in. Yeah. They're just really sort of going where the spirit moves them. And it's just two totally different approaches to competition.
And there are some factors involved. Like, for instance, when I went to San Angelo, I couldn't paint rafted up skipjacks, downtown San Angelo. I had to look around and go, okay,
what's here?
What does everyone want to see? Whereas around here, my home, I feel like I kind of know what are the recognizable iconographic,
the places that speak to you
yes.
and speak to buyers at the same time. You try to meet in the middle somewhere, I would think.
Yeah, so it's easier to plan. When I went to Texas, I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to let the landscape speak to me. And I love that. Yeah. I actually really enjoyed this
a different kind of challenge.
Yeah, it was all new. The caliche dust and the scrubby undergrowth they have, the lack of big trees, the sky was huge.
It's huge. I mean,
it is, but it's beautiful.
Oh, it is.
I loved it. And so,
Tim, what do you do to keep learning in the off season when you're not in the All-Star game, as you continue to aspire to push your work forward? You said, I do want to be the great artist. So what do you do to be pushing yourself in that direction?
At this stage, I'd say the biggest thing is reading a lot. There have been so many art books published over time that you could never exhaust the material that's inside of them. And even the ones you've read, you could read them 10 more times and you'll glean something new every single time. There's to me, 4 or 5 books that are almost all you need. And every time, if I'm in a place where
Can you name 2 of them if people were going to read them?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to be a landscape painter, I'd say Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. John Fabian Carlson wrote it. He's a turn of the century guy. Really simply written, easy to understand book. Whenever I used to teach, I would always have that book and be like, everybody has to get this and read it front to cover 20 times in your life, because every time you're going to learn something new.
Get something new out of it.
If you're maybe a more advanced student, I like Edgar Payne's ideas about landscaping, and he wrote Composition and Design in the Outdoor Landscape. I think it's a real long title. I can't even remember. And all these books you can buy from they're Dover publications, I believe. So they're paperback. You can get a real fancy original printing, for a couple $100, but then it's basically an antique and you're going to destroy it. So get the ones that you can buy off of Amazon. But those 2 I think are good ones. If you like marine painting, you got to get the Groupie books, Emile Groupie. Then there's some more obscure ones, but they all say the same thing. They really do. It's pretty much the same information regurgitated, but just different personalities presented in a slightly different way, different experiences. But as I go on, I'm realizing, okay, they're all the same. They're all saying this, the same few simple things. Some people add little parts that are critical at certain parts of times in your development. The Edgar Payne book it's difficult to read. The way he spoke, I have to read every sentence that he wrote 5 times before I can grasp what he's really trying to say. It wasn't that he was alive in turn of the century, but I think he was like a very a huge intellectual. So me being who I am, I'm just like constantly going, wait, what did he say? What, and I have to like really decipher it. And but it's full of information. He, I think, was one of the more advanced guys with the landscape. So.
And as you're pushing your paintings forward, what would you like to see change about them? Like where do you want to go?
It's a good question. I don't know, because I don't know your understanding of what you're doing is from being ignorant. You don't know, like sometimes I can go, really the best thing is somebody points out, hey, you're not so good at this. Then that clues me in of like where my deficiencies are. Then I can, with the internet, you can actually go on and Google linear perspective. Like, how do I get better at linear perspective? Or how do I get better at light and shade, no-tan structure? When you're an artist and you're in these groups of people where people are talking all the time and exchanging ideas, you'll occasionally hear something that you'll be like, I've never heard of that. I've had conversations with artists and have said things, and then later they come to me and they're like, man, I'm so glad that you mentioned that idea, that thing that you focus on. I'd never heard of that, and it's really changed my work. So you're always hoping that someone is going to throw something back on you. Yeah. It's embarrassing to realize that you've been overlooking something for a really long time, and you're just like, oh man, like I wasn't even thinking about that. So
that's how your work evolves, though.
Yeah.
So whose work do you really admire right now, like in the plein air world?
Oh, in the plein air world, man, there's so many. I admire things about just about everyone. When I used to teach, I would have the what did they call them? Red hat painters or something, but it's like the gal who's like lived a life. She taught grade school or something. Oh
yeah, sure.
And then she wants to take up painting.
They are the red hat ladies. They totally are.
Yeah, her husband's really into golf, so she's well, I want to do something, so I'll take an art class, And I always go, she'll be like maybe even struggling, but they'll do something in their painting that I'll just be like scratching my head going, oh my gosh, wow, that's amazing. So I guess what I'm getting at is that there's nobody that doesn't offer something.
He's not going to say who his favorites are. Whose paintings would you want on your wall? You don't have whose paintings would you stare at every day?
Dead guy or living guy?
Living guy.
Living guy.
Come on. He only likes his own paintings on the wall.
He doesn't know. It's the whole story. We've come full circle.
No,
we started the whole conversation. He doesn't know what his future brings. He doesn't know what you just said.
No, I do know who they are, but I got to think about it, because really what happens as an artist looking at other artists is it's really overwhelming. The internet's big.
Exactly. It's really hard. I mean, somebody asked me the other day, they were like, it was a tourist or whatever or somebody that moved here was coming through, and always try to like welcome them, that sort of thing. And we built a rapport. And, I said, yeah, I've been here almost 20 years. And the guy was like, okay, so tell me seriously, what has been your top favorite concert ever here? And I'm like, I've seen 3,000 concerts here.
Yeah.
I really don't. I mean, there was a time when I saw 1,200 concerts that I might have been able to actually give you an answer.
Yeah.
But after 3,000, it's really, really tough.
It is.
Especially with the internet. The internet has changed that a lot, right?
Yeah. And it's changing all the time. Who your favorite is evolving really every day, know. And I always say that it's based on like what you're struggling with at that time, because whatever you perceive as your weakness is, whoever does that the best, they're the best. So if you're if you're falling down, you're trying to do this thing, and you see someone over there just going, "Oh, it's so easy," you're just like, "Oh, that is amazing." So that's why it's so hard. I have names in my head, but
fair enough.
And it's all
you have a Tim Beall on your wall, don't you?
I do. I think that there are 3 Tim Beall paintings in my house. 3.
See? So Jess recommends Tim Beall paintings
from the BELL period. So maybe we're gonna have to invest in a BEAL eventually.
Tim, that was great talking to you today. We really, really appreciate it.
I got one more question before he goes. But we do need to wrap it up. But I think that just to bring it back to the not depressing stuff we were talking earlier, but Tim, when you are like vexed with adversity or really hard things, which I know you have been in your life, you spoke about one of them, and at the same time, you've got the voices in your head and on your shoulders saying that like it's not good enough. So it's really hard to create. How do you go create? Like for somebody who's suffering in that space, who is like trying to create something in the face of like adversity and self-doubt, how do you get up in the morning and pick up the brush? What do you do?
I don't really know the answer to that, other than that what happens sometimes is it's more a function of you don't really have a choice because you have responsibilities. And so a lot of times I'll put painting off for a long time, out of fear, be afraid to fail, afraid to do the thing that's not good enough. But then all of a sudden I'll realize you got bills coming in. You got to pay your bills. You got to give some product. And I really don't like saying this because I don't want people to think that all they're buying of mine is just product, that I'm painting for money. I always am painting from a place of passion, something that makes me feel good, something that I'm excited about. It just so happens that's also, the wares that I create to go to the marketplace with. Sure. But it's all like I actually hate the feeling of doing a painting that I feel is unacceptable. That's like one of the worst feelings. And again, even I will say, I say to the general public, when you took that painting out of my hands, if I was usually the paintings that I really love hang around forever, and the paintings that I'm like, that's a dog, they're the ones that everyone's jumping up and down going, yay, it's beautiful, so that's another part of the sad story, if you will, is that whenever someone's like, well, you do these things, you should feel really good. I'm like, well, what you're saying should make me feel good doesn't make me feel good. And often the things that do make me feel good go unnoticed. And so it's just a private thing of like, that's what I was trying to do. And the world just kind of looks the other way and goes, oh, well, look at that over there, So it's, that's the part where I guess I'm not my own worst critic, because sometimes I can do something that I'm really happy with, but it's usually never the thing that makes the crowd roar, like, the Michael Jordan doing the whatever slam dunk he did back in the 80s that just got everybody lit, so. Well,
Tim, I think that you are probably making a very good career for yourself. He's in galleries around the state, I guess.
Go for it. You've got your own gallery.
I have my own gallery. I'm not in any galleries anymore.
So you paint for galleries, though. You paint for galleries.
Just mine.
No, just now.
Just his. Okay, so anyway, you're still making a great career for yourself. You might be in museums one day, as you said. You don't know what's going to happen with the work.
Tim, where can they find you? At your gallery.
Yep, Beall Gallery in St. Michael's.
Beall Gallery in St. Michael's. And yeah, it's great to get to talk to you like this. I know that you're always, like many of the artists, got stuff going on during the week of plein air, so we don't always get to gather. And
when you came in, you were really nervous. Was this okay?
It was fine. I mean, I'll never listen to it.
Oh, yeah.
And if I offended anyone with anything that I said, or if I said something that someone disagrees with, I'm really, I'm not, I guess I'm not sorry, but I don't want to be a bad guy, and I don't want to be walking around with a target on my back because I said something that someone doesn't agree with, and that's part of the nervousness. Really.
No,
Yeah, I don't think you have to worry about
if
that.
we wanted to do that, we would talk about what is plein air painting and what is not plein air painting.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would be the subject.
Yeah, I leave that up to Stuart. He knows what that is.
Oh my God. On that note, Tim, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
The Plein Air Easton Podcast is brought to you by the Avalon Foundation and was produced by Nick Richards. Our theme music was generously provided by Blue Dot Sessions, with additional episode music by Poddington Bear. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. You can learn more about Plein Air Easton at pleinaireaston.com.